My name is Aaron McManus, and you are listening to the Battle Ready podcast. I'm here with my dad, Erwin McManus. Here's the thing. Your trip has gotten canceled 2 weeks in a row. You're supposed to be gone, so we keep pre-recording this, and now we're just getting ahead.
I was supposed to be on the East Coast in Greenville, South Carolina for the launch of Studio Church with Eric Johnson.
No, it's not Studio Church.
I'm sorry.
It's not. No, it's good. Leave this in.
No. I just did what everyone
does.
What
everybody does.
I wanted edited out.
Mosaic Church.
No.
Yes, you did it. We got it.
No, actually, it's funny because Eric Johnson is launching Studio, and he sent me his original idea of Studio Church, and I said, take church off of it because Studio would be the equivalent of church in that sense.
Yeah.
And unless you're just going to call it church. And so it's called Studio, but I just slipped back into old school, adding church to everything.
We hate it when people are like Mosaic LA or Mosaic Church. I'm like, no, we're just Mosaic.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
so
all it is.
I was going to the East Coast, Greenville, South Carolina, to be with Eric Johnson at Studio, the launch. And last week,
Greenville.
I was snowed out, and then this week I'm iced out.
Yeah, you can't get in.
So I'm going to celebrate the launch of Studio
remotely
from balmy Los Angeles.
From balmy Los Angeles. What's balmy?
I see. It's about having a plethora of words that you can choose from.
Sure, but balmy. Does that sound like is that like lip balm or hand balm?
Now, Brooke, wouldn't you say today is balmy?
Yeah, pleasantly warm.
Yeah,
today's not pleasantly warm. Have you been outside?
It's chilly,
it's cloudy, and it's cold.
Cloudy and it's overcast and
no.
All right,
no, it's not. Today feels like the East Coast or something. It's not even, but I guess not the real East Coast.
Oh, East Coast having snowstorms and
it's like 9 degrees.
It's cold. Oh my goodness, that I'm
so sorry, Arturo. We're not coming to see you until spring.
That Buffalo Bills game that was 6 degrees above zero and a wind chill factor of 6 or 7 degrees below zero, or maybe even more.
Yeah,
they said if you're out in the cold for 30 minutes, you would get frostbite. But these guys are playing football for 3 hours. I'm not sure how that works.
I got invited to go skiing on the East Coast, and they were like, we're going to drive to Montreal and ski, and then they told me it was -30. And I was like, thank God I didn't go. Not because I'm flattered by the invitation. It'd be so cool to see the snow over there, but I would have been dead.
But
There's not enough on this body to keep me warm.
You have no body fat to protect you.
Not enough body fat. I start eating like as much Twix as I can until I get there.
But can you imagine how much it would hurt at 30 below when you fall or hit something, which I would, of course, do.
That just sounds terrible. So here's the deal. We had church this last week at Mosaic, and it doubled overnight.
In Hollywood.
Where did these people come from?
I don't know.
It doubled.
Mean, it was just so exciting to see people just coming and seeing people we've not seen in a long time and seeing people we've never met before.
Incredible.
And adding hundreds and hundreds of chairs, watching our few volunteers trying to add enough seats for all the people that were surprising us. It was really a beautiful thing.
It was a beautiful thing. So then we had a staff meeting to follow, and I sat in the staff meeting, and Mom came. She made an appearance, which was awesome.
Always makes me nervous.
Kimmy, it always makes me so. She sat front row, which also made me so nervous.
But she was late
by minutes, which just baffles me because she gets up at like 4 a.m.
That means she was deciding whether she was coming or not.
She got caught in the, I'm unsure.
In the indecision, yes.
Uncertainty of whether she's going to show up. So you talked a lot about fear and faith and leadership. Because we were having this discussion of like, how do you even manage double in growth? Like, we've had a great number of people have been coming. It's been slow to come back. People have been really afraid. Then everyone in LA got Omicron, I felt like, over the holidays. And you had COVID.
And you did too.
But I had it during Thanksgiving.
And I had it during Christmas.
Yeah, you ruined Christmas. I ruined Thanksgiving.
Mariah and Kim had it over New Year's Eve.
But when you got it, it felt like everyone had it. Not on our team necessarily, but like every friend I had.
Like everyone in LA had
Everyone in LA, like every second person had Omicron.
And I wouldn't be surprised if 1 out of every 10 people had Omicron in LA. It was insane.
Which is a very different reality from 2 years ago, because I feel like I didn't know a single person who had it.
That's true. During the
initial
spread of COVID, we almost knew no one who ever got COVID.
Yeah.
So it was kind of crazy, even in the middle of LA.
In the middle, yeah. But let's jump into the staff meeting a little bit.
But I was asked the question.
Who asked?
By my wife.
Oh, mom asked it. Yes.
And your mom, and she said, "What do you do with leaders who still aren't showing up after 2 years?"
Showing up in person.
In person,
right?
Showing up in person after 2 years, and I said, "You need to recognize the fact that they may be wonderful people, but they're not leaders.
They're not your leaders anymore.
Yeah, they're not your leaders anymore.
Yeah.
And if they're not actually leading people, and to lead people, you have to be present, and you have to be engaged, you have to be connected, and it was hard because it's not a conversation I really wanted to have with my wife in front of all of our team,
all the other people. Yeah,
but we've had this conversation over the last 2 years.
Yeah,
because early on, I could see the fear responses from different people, and it's different when you have, let's say, a doctor who says, "I can't come because I face a high viral load every week and I don't want to infect other people." That's not a person who's staying away from the front lines. That's a person who's right on the front lines. Then a person who's so afraid, saying, "I just can't risk ever getting COVID, and so I'm just not going to engage with human beings again," which we also have people who are there.
Right.
And they're not, people who are highly vulnerable or anything like that. And I said, look, you have to respect wherever people are. That was the beginning point.
Okay.
But you don't lower your standards of leadership.
Okay.
And that's one of the tricky things is that a person may say, "Hey, this is where I'm at in my life right now. These are the choices I think I need to make for me or for me and my family or whatever it is." And you respect that and go, "I understand that." But you can't lead if you're going to actually make decisions that are hyper cautious or even driven by fear. And because certainly if any organization in the world is driven by faith and courage and servanthood, it's the church. And it's not that you're not wise. It's not that you don't pay attention to the science and the data. And it's not that you are reckless. But you also have to realize that people are being informed by different emotions. They're not just being informed by different pieces of data. Right. I also think it's crazy that so many, so many Christians will go to sporting events and
they go to football events, but they won't.
They go to basketball, football.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Soccer. It's interesting. But they won't go to church because it's too dangerous. Well, wait a minute. Is it that it's too dangerous to go to church, or is that going to the basketball game has enough value for you, and really going to church doesn't, in your mind, have enough value for your life? And again, that's a part of just recognizing where people are. I'm not even addressing where a person is in their journey. It's where they are in their journey in relationship to how much authority, influence, and responsibility they're giving in the church.
I feel like there's a lot of conversations here, but mostly rooted in this idea that everyone has been divided. Because we said this, I think,
right.
post-staff meeting, that, we said this in like our a different meeting with Lawrence in Seattle and some of our guys on a Zoom before the staff meeting, basically that our faith isn't what brings us together anymore.
Mm.
It used to be that we had a common faith or a common journey, right?
Right?
We wanted to search for faith. We wanted to search for God. We wanted to go on this faith journey together. Now it really isn't that anymore. It's, do you believe in masks or do you not believe in masks? Do you believe in vaccines or no vaccines? It is where you stand in your politics. Because whether it's a viral load or not, it feels a bit like there's always an excuse to get you in or out of whatever you want to do.
It is true that one of the things that's happened over the last 2 years is that politics has now learned how to paint in medicine and science. And
be more specific than that.
You could have a political position in the past and still have the same view about medicine or science, but now I literally know of people who are more liberal who say, "I don't believe in masks, but I'm not going to let people think I'm a Republican. And so I'm going to wear a mask because
it's interesting, isn't it?
It's a statement of my political views.
Yeah.
And I think that there are people on the right who are also doing the same kind of thing, that they now see this space as a political space. And
which space?
Well, like if you're vaccinated, you're a liberal. If you're not vaccinated, you're a conservative. If you're, and I'm going, no, there are a lot of Republicans who actually are vaccinated. By the way, one of the groups that really is reticent about being vaccinated are Black Americans. Right. I think that they're actually the highest population group, percentage-wise, that has refused to be vaccinated. And most Black Americans, I think, are Democrats. So, but no one ever brings it up. And I'm going, no, you see, it is.
What does it have to do with the doctors? I want to talk about the doctors.
No, what I'm saying is that
what does it do with the doctors?
They've been trying to make, it seems like our society, our media has been trying to make everything political. And that's why you don't actually paint the true picture. It's not just far right-wing white supremacists who refuse to be vaccinated. There are also liberal Black Americans who refuse to be vaccinated. But we're trying to act like everybody's in a different space.
Right. And all I'm talking about is the doctors.
No, with doctors, I'm saying.
That's all I'm talking about this. No, because I want to talk about specific things, not not generalizations.
They're not generalizations. These are really important, I think, distinctions that that we're being told everything is black and white, and it's not. And with doctors, I know a lot of doctors who come to Mosaic. I know a lot of doctors who don't come not because they're afraid, but because they feel that they would endanger other people because they're around it so much. Okay. And I also know some doctors who are genuinely afraid of getting COVID, and they've redirected their lives even in the medical field. Okay. But I don't think doctors are the issues here.
I'm not saying that the issue. This is just the issue at hand. Is the conversation we're having in staff.
The conversation at hand is when you're leading an organization, you have to have a standard for leaders. Okay. It doesn't matter where it's a church or a business or whatever. Okay. And while you don't get to dictate a person's choices as a citizen of a country, right. In your organization, you do have to decide what are the requirements to lead. And so if a person says, hey, I just can't risk going outside, you need to say, hey, that's a choice you have to make, but you can't be in leadership if you're going to still be completely isolated 3 years later and not interacting, engaging with people.
Right.
And so the conversation for me is different. It's not about a person's personal choice. It's about what is required to lead. I mean, can you imagine me being—
But your personal choices, I guess some of your personal choices dictate whether you're able to lead or even are in the conversation to lead, right?
That's the whole point.
No, I know, but you're saying it's not about personal choices, but it actually is about personal choices.
No, I'm saying is that you can be a part of Mosaic's community and still be online. You can be online and you're part of Mosaic's community, but you can't be a leader at Mosaic and by only being online.
And this is like where it's a whole new world, right? Yeah. Because it's like they're obviously not. So the doctors that we're talking about, which I don't even know who we're talking about. I just know that there's doctors on her team. So there's no individual judgment. There's not even a mass judgment. It's mostly just like this idea of there's leaders who won't come in anymore because they feel like they can't. And it's like this conversation of are they still leaders? Can they lead online? Because now they're only online people. So, how do you lead in a new world? Mm-hmm. How do you manage? Because this is just one side of it, right? We have the other side of it where there's people who are like, and we have friends of ours, and there's people who are unfriends. We have people who've moved. The moment everything locked down, like we're getting out of here. They're like, if the government makes our children get vaccinated, we're out of here. And we were talking about it as like, this is the spectrum. We have both sides of it going right. But then how do you put either side in leadership?
Okay. Let me flip it upside down. We have people who have said very clearly, if the state of California mandates that my small children have to be vaccinated, we're moving from California. And we're already seeing families leave California, moving to other states, because while they have been vaccinated as adults, they do not feel as a parent it's the best decision for their 5-year-old or for their 8-year-old, and or even for their 12-year-old. And so I'm going, okay, that's a decision you've got to make as a parent. But when you move, obviously, unless you're going to start a campus in that city for Mosaic or something, you're no longer really qualified to lead because you've left. And so in some sense, I go, hey, if you're one of our leaders and you're moving to another state, there's a part of me that goes, I don't blame you. You know,
take me with you,
because this is getting kind of insane over here. But at the same time, like if you want to stay engaged, then start something where you're at, and create something new.
Yeah, definitely. We have spaces for that, right?
Yeah.
But like, I guess the conversation still is: are they leaders or not? Are they a good investment as well? Because like it's not. It's different, right? It's not a good investment as they're great humans on both spectrums. But it's like, can you have either side really leading? Like, we're now in like this space where it's like the radicals become irrelevant because you can't really invest because they're not really helping. They're busy being radicals, you know, either leaving the States or not showing up on Sunday. And so you kind of have, and it's, you know, attendance isn't required, but it's helpful. Presence is preferred.
Right.
And presence is like a vital part of community, right? And I was thinking about this because I was like, we went to go watch some movie called The Kingsman. It was like 50-50. It was like good, but it wasn't great. But there were some good moments. But those moments like in war, when the guy who's your boss or the officer, the commanding officer dies, and then now you're the commanding officer. Like war doesn't have like I guess a prerequisite for leadership skills. If the whole top half of the ladder gets blown up, it's now just you. And I do feel like, we were talking about this with our teams, you know, we have so many amazing people, but so many young people who've never done the role they're doing before ever.
Yeah.
You know, and so there is this like, and it is this odd thing of like the leaders who were before are uninterested, or they're not in the space, or they've moved, or they've gotten a new job and they're not able to help in the same way before. So it does feel like a wartime effort, right? Like you're taking the middle of who's left and going, we're going to build leadership into you.
Yeah. But we're also building cultural standards based on the people who are most fearful. I mean,
how so?
Well, look at education. You know, there are just masses of teachers and unions who are saying we're not going to go back into the classroom,
right? But
and be endangered. And I'm like,
yeah, California canceled schools all of January, right, Brooke?
Yeah. Oh, let me check on that.
At least your preschool.
Some schools did.
Some schools.
Yeah,
so,
my school had to age out my son's group because they were so short of staff.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So I guess the question is, do you then set new standards based on the most cautious teachers, or do you go find individuals who have a higher resilience and capacity for risk and say, we need teachers who are willing to be in the classrooms?
But there's still going to be like a period of time where that teacher who's willing doesn't know how to teach.
Well, no, I think we have maybe.
I don't think so.
I'm hoping we have lots of qualified teachers out there.
Well, I think the issue with that is unions, I think. Because I think there are lots of teachers who would go back to work.
Yeah.
But then there's lots of teachers who are going, it doesn't make sense. Like how often kids get sick are going to get me sick, and it just doesn't work.
What happens is the language goes, oh, we want to protect the kids, but actually it's not about that. It's about protecting the teachers.
Yeah.
And you know, so you have to ask yourself, are we going to move to the place in our society where every rule, every regulation, every law, every mandate is based on the highest level of fear and the highest level of caution?
Right.
You know, because even back when the pandemic really exploded, you guys were not allowed to go surfing.
They shut the
it was
beaches
against the law to go surfing.
No, but you could golf.
Yeah, and I'm going, is it because the people creating the laws like golfing, but they're not surfers because they're kind of older white men?
Well, I mean, I found it, I just found it so hypocritical that you have all these country clubs in LA, because there's a whole thing about how there's no big parks in Los Angeles, but there's all of these country clubs in every part of the city. And that those were open.
Yeah, there's private green space in LA, but almost no public green space.
They took the hoops off the public basketball courts.
Right. So we can't go play basketball with our friends outdoors during the pandemic.
Right.
But you could still go golfing in your private country club.
With your friends.
So we have to basically at least ask the question, is this really based on science? How does a person go surfing in the ocean and somehow endanger the whole society?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
But you can march and protest with tens of thousands of people and it's never questioned as dangerous to the society.
It is very interesting.
Even though
I don't want to get into that part.
No, I'm just saying, and that's not what we're talking about today.
We're trying to talk about something super specific.
No, we're actually talking about whether our decisions are based on fear.
Well, really, we were just talking about doctors.
No, you were talking about doctors.
No, you brought it up.
No.
Yes.
I was asking the question about, are people still qualified to lead if they're not ready to step into the public world again?
Okay. So yes or no?
My answer is no.
Okay.
That you can't be the last to step forward and be a leader.
Even if you're on the front lines with medical stuff.
No, I consider them actually frontline leaders, and I find very few of them actually afraid to engage for their own lives, but concerned for other people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
and it's tough, right? Because it's such a niche team. Like they're working on something. They're working on very specific things.
Yeah,
and it is hard. And I do find though that a lot of people are willing to come back, but or are interested in coming back and being here in person, but the value of it has decreased. There isn't this high value for being in church or being in a religious space or being in a faith space, and definitely not to serve.
Right. I mean, we were just at the playoff game for the Rams.
Yeah, it was great.
Amazing. But I'm watching, I don't know how many people that stadium holds, but
it's like 80,000, I think.
I mean, I saw
SoFi
80,000 people, and I almost didn't see anyone wearing a mask.
No, it was crazy.
Even though the sign kept coming up on the giant billboard that you're required to wear a mask, I didn't see really anyone wearing a mask in 80,000 people. Yeah. I don't think
unless actively eating.
Yeah, they were eating the whole 3.5 hours, and
every 30 seconds of this game.
And I just like to be entertained. We're willing to risk our lives,
right?
But to become the church again and to serve the world, we seem to be more apprehensive.
Yeah,
and to educate our kids, we seem to be incredibly apprehensive, and so I just think that we need to be aware that data is never objective. Data is informed by our internal world. If we are driven by fear, we see the data differently. When we're driven with courage, we see the data differently. It doesn't mean that one's more educated or less educated, or one's ignoring it and one's actually paying attention to it. What you're bringing to the data is what you're going to get out of it. Years ago, I wrote a book called Soul Cravings, and in Soul Cravings, I actually talked about how when you are in community, you are less likely to be violent. When you're disconnected from community, you are more likely to be violent. And in fact, I make an argument that disconnection becomes the environment for violence against other people, that you have to see someone as them to be violent against them. When you see someone as us, you will not be violent against them. And what we're having in our society is we have the loss of community across our nation because we have the isolation.
So an inclusive community, not an exclusive community.
Right.
Because the argument would also say that most bad things happen from bad community.
Because they have a distinct us against them narrative. So if everyone is us, then there's no one to be violent against.
Right.
Like if you're for all of humanity, you're not going to justify your act of violence.
There's very few places like that.
Yeah,
I
know.
Maybe none exist.
But I'm looking at it as a spectrum. And what's happened in our society is the massive isolation, the disconnection from each other, I think has been the context for out of control violence in our society. I mean, we have more violence right now in every major city in America than we've ever had, I think, in modern history. And to actually think that this pandemic of violence is disconnected from the loss of community is naive. So when I talk about getting people back into community, I'm not fighting for my legal right to do church or have church or something like that. Yeah. I'm actually fighting for what humans actually need.
Yeah.
Humans need community and connection for mental health. Yeah. They need it for emotional wellness. And we actually need community to eliminate the worst actions of human beings like violence.
Right.
And I mean, the level of crime in our city is is insane.
It's insane.
I mean, we have theft taking place at a level that we've just never seen. L.A. It looks like a Blade Runner city, and
it's crazy. The woman, young girl got killed on my street.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah,
and what we are not factoring in is that while we're fighting a virus, we have basically left unprotected all the other walls that protect the human spirit. We have to fight against loneliness and despair and depression. We have to fight against mental illness and we have to fight for community and health. And we're not doing that right now.
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it feels like so many of the major cities are in a massive deficit, which is crazy to think that we're so privileged as a society, right? And as a community, and yet there's still so much work that needs to be done to get people help. Not only to get people help, but also to make the streets safe. And it's a nightmare right now. There was there's a young girl that was killed in a shop, broad daylight, by herself.
24-year-old,
super
woman.
young. Yeah, like she was at UCLA. I believe, and guy came in, stabbed her, left. It's just so sad, right? And we don't talk about it to cause fear. I have friends who are moving to LA and they're like nervous. I'm like, look, you just have to be real. They tell us to every guy or girl who moves here, you're moving to a city, you have to be aware, like at all times. When you're walking into your car, when you're getting out of your house, when you're walking into a store, you don't like just turn it off. You have to always be aware, and not like a hypervigilance awareness, but also just underneath that. Like
in a vigilant way.
Semi-vigilant.
Yeah. But the conversation we were actually having in our team was about leadership and developing leaders and moving people toward the best version of themselves.
Right.
And because that's what we have to be committed to is calling people to the most heroic, courageous, honorable, noble, generous version of themselves. And we can't give up on that. And I think what we thought is that if we just put the world on hold for 2 years, people would come back the same that they went in, but it's not true.
No, we're not the same people.
No, and we're not better. We're getting worse.
We're worse. We're definitely worse. Yeah. I'm worse. I'm not better. To think the version of it's not even funny. And I know you're not laughing at me. I'm saying like it's not funny. I think it's a joke. Like the version of me 2 years ago, I'm like, who was that person? I miss that person. I'm not that person anymore. So it's like, is it worth even trying to get back, or do you just have to go start new?
Well, you need to fight for the better version of you, the new version of you. And that's why what we do is important. It frustrates me when people, even Christians, make it so superficial as we have the right to worship. And I'm like, this can't be simply a battle for our political right to worship. We are supposed to be fighting for humanity, for humanity's future, for their well-being, for their health.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm fighting for. So when I see people flooding into Hollywood this past week, I'm excited because I realize most of these people have lost so much ground.
Yeah.
And we're going to be able to help them get back on track. And that's
shocked?
Exciting for me. Yes, I was shocked. I mean, I'd love to say I was so full of faith that I just knew that we're going to, have that kind of swell of people.
It is really hard to, like, we've been talking about this, right? And if you feel like attacked by us as someone in a part of Mosaic or a part of Battle Ready or whatever, we're just talking. We're having conversations. There's no judgments here. It's just, we're bringing things to light. But I do think it's harder for families to come back.
It is because so many families feel frustrated.
Well, no, but I also think like if your kid gets COVID, then you're out for 2 weeks and then you're having to work and watch your kid if you work at home. And if you don't work at home, you're having to go to work or take 2 weeks off to be with your kid. So then it becomes this like catch-22 or just this endless cycle of my kid's going to get sick because he's going to go to school. And then if he goes to church, then there's another factor. And so it's like, I don't know. I don't know how to do it because I don't know what I would do as a parent. I mean, I know what you would do as a parent. I would never go to school. I would never be in school this entire time. But it's complicated, right?
It isn't, because a lot of parents have told me, hey, we would love to get fully engaged. We just can't risk missing any more work if our kids are not allowed to go to school. Right. And right now, it's not even if your child gets COVID. It's like if your child has a runny nose, or if your child has a sore throat, if your child has any symptom. Right now, we've become, Brooke?
I had a question for you.
All right.
Question.
But I didn't mean to interrupt your thought.
Oh, yeah, no, just my closing thought is right now, if your child gets any symptom, they're out, right?
Yeah, it's a zero tolerance policy for sickness.
Which, in what world was that ever true?
No, it was like, be sick, okay.
No, every toddler is sick all the time.
That was like the joke growing up. It's like, I'm going to see how much time I can get in the nurse's office. I'm trying to get a break. I'm trying to get 15, catch my breath. And then it was like, okay, you'll be okay. Now go back. And you just went, you didn't go home unless you were bleeding or throwing up.
And even then, it's like, can you rally?
Yeah, can you puke and rally? Just swallow it and you'll be all right.
Yeah. If it's not an artery, we can bandage them.
I mean, school. I was listening to a great debate. Oh, I wish you had listened to this thing too. I got to send it to you. Say it.
What?
Brooke has a question.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, but you got so excited about your debate.
It's fine. I'll talk about it later.
What you were saying about how logistically it's so difficult for parents. And Aaron, you said earlier, I thought it was interesting that our teams now have so many young people who've never done what they're doing. Right. And it's almost like all of these restrictions and regulations, they're creating like this lost generation of 30s and 40-year-olds who've served faithfully at church, and now, due to whatever reason, are like being pulled out. And you have all these young people stepping in. And what is the church losing by like not being able to engage with that age group like it was before? Or what's going to happen when all these people come back and they're serving under a 23-year-old who had nothing to lose by coming to church every week?
I mean, at this rate, Michael Schultz is going to be the executive pastor.
Michael Schultz, how old is Michael Schultz?
How old is Michael?
22 now.
22.
But but it's also like, I look at the young guys, young men and women who are in that age group, who aren't afraid, who show up and like are faithful, and then they get sick, they take a week off, and then they come back. They're just a different level of resilience, right? They're the people who have kind of survived this thing, and when people are like, "Were you scared?" They're like, "What are you talking about?"
Resilience and responsibility.
Well, faithfulness, because some could say that you're being irresponsible.
To come to church?
Yes.
Yes.
We've been told that too.
You've been told that? Sorry.
Yeah, that we're being irresponsible by having people come back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And like not mandate masks. This always turns into a COVID talk. I'm not mad about it, but it does. We talk about it a lot.
But it isn't the conversation I wanted to have. It's the conversation that we're almost like obligated to have. Yeah, because everything we want to talk about, whether it's leadership, whether it's creativity, whether it's business, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's church, whether it's relationships, everything's in the context of this world that we're living in right now.
And that was Mariah's point, right? Because at one point in the staff meeting, she goes, "Hey, can we please just stop talking about COVID
and just move on?"
And I was like, "How?"
She's like, "Stop getting tested. Let's just stop finding out."
She's not wanting to be quoted by that.
She didn't say that.
She didn't say it. You said it. Brooke said it. It's a really interesting thing, right? Like, that's what Florida's doing. They're just saying like, don't get tested. Just if you're sick, just stay home and get better and come back.
Well, now we've become a culture where we just are testing each other every day.
And what do you mean that, like, emotionally?
All right.
So what do you want to talk about?
So, Brooke, your question was,
what are we losing in this new, like, lost generation of young parents who are navigating schools and restrictions because they're not the leaders we've invested in the past 10 or 15 years, who were going to be the next wave of leaders in the church, and now they're gone, or they're not coming back?
Are they lost or are they hidden? Because that was your conversation in staff, like hiding in the cave.
Yeah, I think that a lot of them are there, but they're hiding in fear. And it's interesting. There's several scenarios in the scriptures in the Old Testament where the people of Israel didn't know they had more people than they had. There's one moment where it says that some of them were hiding in caves, living like animals. Others had gone to fight for the other side because they figured the other side was going to win. and so I think we're in one of those moments right now where there are going to be some people who are going to be courageous and they're going to pave the way for the future. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, whether you like it or not, those people are the ones that you think are being reckless and right. or maybe they're just not paying attention to science. I mean, I was just in a room with 1,000 business people, and they were all working together to build companies, to create income, to generate wealth. And while other people are going to go, hey, I'm just going to live in neutral, or I'm going to take unemployment, or I'm going to just be unemployed for a while, these people are going to create wealth. It's going to be disproportionate. And then you're going to wonder, wait a minute, what advantage do they have that I didn't have? The advantage was in a moment where other people were afraid, they just took territory.
Right.
And I think it's true even in the church where there are people who are just, they're in a sense relinquishing the influence and the effect that they should have in people's lives. And I think that's sad because we needed them to be mentoring and investing in the future generation.
Yeah.
And I remember years and years ago, my brother Alex was here in LA. He had a Bible study in downtown LA with all these young actors and people in our community. And he said, hey, I need someone to become my apprentice so I can train you how to lead this kind of group, and you'll take over this group. Do I have a volunteer? And all these people, not one of them volunteered. Alex had invited this guy who wasn't yet a follower of Jesus, and the guy felt bad that no one was volunteering. So he volunteered to lead the group and came to faith really fast. And so the next week, Alex came back and said, all right, he's my apprentice. He's going to lead the group when I stop leading the group. And one of the guys who was a Christian for a long time, he's actually a really famous writer in the industry, said, well, that guy can't lead. He just gave his life to Jesus. I'll take the group. And Alex said, hey, you're welcome to become his apprentice because he stepped up first and you were silent. Mm-hmm. And so if he chooses you, you can become his apprentice in the group. And I love this. Like,
how'd that go?
It actually, strangely enough, went very well. Because we were creating a culture that said, we're not going to go with who's the most educated or the most experienced or the most seasoned. We're going to go with whoever steps up with the most courage and says, I'm not prepared, I'm not qualified,
I'm just going to do it.
But I'm going to do it.
Right.
And movements are advanced by people not with the most talent, ability, education, a resume. They're advanced by the people who have the most courage, and they refuse to be stopped.
So what are your future predictions what are your predictions of the future when it comes to church, when it comes to like the way that cities navigate? Do you think people are going to flee the cities?
I think people are already fleeing the cities.
But I feel like LA got filled right back up. Like it's definitely not less full than it used to be.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It doesn't feel like that anymore.
LA's lost a lot of people, but LA's a city where there's always new people who come.
Yeah.
You know, and I've seen this in my 30 years here, massive exodus. But there's always a new generation of young people with visions and dreams and hopes that come here. But I don't know if that's true in every city. Because remember, no one could have ever imagined Detroit becoming a hollow shell of a city.
Right.
And it was the epicenter of industry and car manufacturing. And Detroit didn't pay attention to the signs and lost its future. And that can happen to any city in the world.
Right.
And right now we have people who are flooding Tennessee, flooding Texas, flooding Colorado, flooding Florida,
flooding Idaho,
and they probably don't want those two people, but they're getting them.
Yeah,
and there's going to be a new flourishing in those cities and in those states, and so I wouldn't. It's happened before. Remember, Rome was the center of the universe
until it wasn't.
Right. Italy was the most powerful empire on the planet, and now it's just a boot.
Rome, yeah.
I mean, the Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
Now there was a time where, France was a global power with Napoleon, and you realize the landscape of the world, it does shift.
Yeah.
So we live in a world we think, oh, New York, LA, London, they're always going to be the most powerful cities in the world. Well, that's not history proves that that's not always the case.
Right.
And so one of the things I think is the future belongs to the bold. It always has, and it always will. And, even in our South Pasadena campus, we still have like 20 senior adults who are probably all over 80 years old who come every
week,
single week.
Yeah.
They're there, rain or shine. And I'm looking at they're in the highest probability of contracting COVID at a dangerous level. Yeah. And yet they're there every week. Nothing is stopping them. So maybe we should look at some of these senior adults and go, we need to get an IV of their courage.
Right.
Of their faith, of their intention. And they meet together as a Bible study every week, and then they come into the gathering every single week. And
they're wonderful.
And if you're a 22-year-old and you step up with courage and faith,
I have a question.
You're gonna become a future leader. You are.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you do? Like, I feel like this is a scenario, and I want to come, but my wife is too afraid for our kid. Or wife, I want to come, but my husband's too scared for our kid. And
both of those scenarios are scenarios I actually know people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we were standing in the back lobby because someone tried to bring their dog into church, and that's always like a fun experience. And I was talking with Eric, and then we met a family, and they're really sweet. And
with your friend Eric Roy,
yeah, and the mom was like walking with, like, the baby had to have been 1 year old, and Eric has an 18-month daughter named Rooney, and he was like, "Hey, we have a really great kids program. Like, you should check it out. Like, I think your kid would love it." She's like, "Oh, he's a pandemic baby," and he's like, "What do you mean?" Like he doesn't like people. Like, he's really nervous. He's a pandemic. He's like, "Oh yeah, so is mine." And she's like, "Oh, when was she born?" And he was like, "Oh, March 26th of 2020, like
at
literally
the birth of the pandemic,
2 weeks after." And she was like, "Oh." And she's like, "And she's fine?" And she's like, "She has to, like, we have to tell her to, like, chill on hugging people because she's so social." So I think we put in these kind of, like, mental blocks and barriers.
Yeah.
But how do we break through them? And also I want to ask, like, what do you do with, like, the husband and wife thing? Can you do anything? Or is it just better to just be like, "Okay, we love you. But just be friends. Let's stay friends."
Yeah. So I don't know why, but I had this image of these M&Ms that you put into a prescription bottle of really dangerous pills.
Right.
And you don't realize if you open them up, the M&Ms are just really tasty and there's nothing wrong with them. Like, it's like defining our child as a pandemic baby.
Right.
Because you're now putting the warning label on your child saying, this human...
Warning, my kid's weird.
Warning, my kid doesn't do well with humans.
Yeah, doesn't play well with others.
I don't know if people are aware of this, but there is no other species on this planet that you're going to need as much as a human being. And I have talked to parents who have said to me, my child has never met another child. And they're now going to 3 years
dangerous.
old. It's so dangerous to have a child who's 2, 3, 4 years old that is not having social interactions with other children. I mean, look, I want you to learn math and English and science, but that's probably not what you're getting in preschool. Right?
No, you're getting the alphabet.
You're not getting that in first or second grade, although you're learning how to read. But the thing you're getting most is how to socialize with other human beings.
Right.
And frankly, I think the number one determinant of success is usually emotional intelligence.
Right.
And if our children don't know how to have relational emotional intelligence, it's going to be a really challenging life for them.
It really is.
Because one day,
so what do you tell them?
Junior high.
No, but what do you tell them?
You need to get your kid around other kids.
Do you say that to your friends?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What do they say back?
Well,
I'm trying.
I look at people our friends Aaron and Haven, whose little girl was incredibly vulnerable to all kinds of issues and very fragile. And then when she had COVID, it was nothing.
Yeah, she was really protected.
And
so
I
what
look
do you
at
tell
them
those people?
and I think, wow.
No, what are the practical handles?
The reason I bring them up is have the kind of courage and emotional and relational health that they have.
Right.
Realizing that the statistics show that there's almost zero danger for your children.
Right.
That the greatest danger is isolating your children and teaching them to live in fear. Because once you ingrain fear into the psyche of a human being before they're 6 years old, you're not going to be able to extricate that fear out of who they are as a person. They're going to live the entire life paralyzed by fear. And whatever the symptoms are of COVID, the likelihood that will have a sustaining negative effect is so small in comparison to the lifelong effect of being raised afraid.
So interesting. So fascinating.
And of being raised isolated and alone.
Well, being alone is not good.
No.
We love our doctors. We love our church. We love our podcast. We love people getting to hang out in person, like really in person. I think there's such a value for it, right?
Yeah. And I want to hear people, what I want people to hear me say is, I'm not saying the world is safe.
Yeah.
See, I'm saying the world is dangerous.
Yeah.
And you need to accept that and step into life with courage, just like before the pandemic.
Well, that was a part of the staff, right? Like someone asked, can you just tell them it's safe now?
Yeah.
And you said, it's impossible.
And I said, I never said it was safe.
It wasn't safe before.
Yeah.
So to think it's safe now is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's more dangerous now. You have to have more faith and more risk and more bravery, more willingness to put yourself at risk, to go do something, to do anything.
Yeah, and I've seen this so many times before. I saw this with the AIDS crisis. I saw this with Y2K at the year 2000.
Yeah.
I saw it after 9/11.
Right.
An overwhelming percentage of humans will live by fear, and all they need is one event or one experience, one factor to justify the fear that they feel comfortable with.
Right.
And in all those situations, I always called people to rise above the fear, to live a life of faith and courage. So I'm being consistent. And because what science cannot do for you is give you courage.
And that's a fact.
And that is a
scientific fact.
And what you have to decide is, what kind of life are you going to live?
Right. Yeah.
How are you going to live it? How are you going to raise your kids to live it? And the generation that refuses to live in fear, who lives by faith and courage, who decides to be resilient, to have grit and determination, they're going to own the future. So if I were an investment banker in the future, I'd say the future is wide open. The future is wide open for everyone who wants to have the courage to go create it.
I think we're going to end there. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Battle Ready podcast. We're really grateful for every person who checks this out, listens and watches on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. There's a bunch of other ones that I was reminded that people check them out. And if you have, if you're on Google, or I don't even know the other ones that you can check it out. But we're streaming everywhere. Just, stick your phone up into the air and you'll catch it. But check it out. Rate and review this podcast. Let us know what you think. Leave your thoughts in the comments on Instagram and on YouTube. And we're really grateful. We're going to try to get back to you. So check out our TikTok. We don't have anything up there yet, but we're going to get stuff up there soon. All right. See you guys next week.